everybody. Welcome to the first webinar of 2021. Hopefully everybody is well. I appreciate your joining me today. Thank you very much. Today we're going to be doing some projects that are slightly different than what you normally see me do. We're going to start with a still life, and then I'm going to edit a flower image a couple of different ways. And then we're going to do, of course, we have to have one barn in there. And then we're going to take another flower and we're going to turn it into something quite funky and make a card. So without further ado, and don't forget to grab your notes today. And today is a really good day to get the notes for the seminar because I'm going to be using a piece of software as I go on. And you're going to get that software for free if you get the notes, if you buy the notes. So, alrighty, let's get rolling here. So, we're going to start with this still life image. My friend Antoinette, who's listening, may recognize this from one of the setups at the New England Camera Club Council a few years ago. We do some hijinks room with different setups and things, and I thought this one was very cool. But we're going to do some very somewhat different processing on it. So first of all, we're going to start, of course, by duplicating our background layer, and I like the keyboard shortcut Control-J. I did my basic editing as Lightroom, as I usually do, but we're focusing on our Photoshop, and I'm going to be using Luminar, Nik, and Topaz tonight, plus this new software we're going to talk about in a little while. Ready, so here I want to do some color adjustments. So I'm going to add a hue and saturation layer. And excuse me, instead of adjusting the colors for the master, which would adjust all of the colors, I'm going to selectively make some changes. So I'm going to click that drop down and we're going to start with the reds. And I actually want to desaturate this just a little bit. So I'm going to come down to a -24. And I just wanted to pull back that really bright red that was in the background there. Next, I'm going to work on the yellows, and we're going to up the saturation just a little bit to brighten up that center bottle. And then I'm also going to lighten, or actually pull back on the lightness a little bit on the yellows, so we can make that pop a little bit more. Then we're going to go into cyans, and we're going to just tweak that saturation just a teeny bit, just to 4, just, bring up this deeper cyan color in here, turquoisey color. And then we're going to do our blues, and that we're going to go a little bit more up to 18, 19, 18, somewhere around there. Alrighty, so we can close this box, and then I'll show you the before and after for what we did. So that was our before. And this is our after. So we've toned down some of the colors, but yet brightened up and intensified the others just a little bit. So I'm going to take this into Luminar. And just like with our Topaz, because I have this adjustment layer, if I were to open the other software now, it only can read that one layer. So I'm going to create my merged layer above that because I don't really want to flatten this. I like to keep my hue and saturation here in case I need to come back to it. And if you've seen me do this before, you may remember the keyboard shortcut is Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. On a Mac, that would be Command, Option, Shift, E. And I always like to rename that layer so I can remember what I did there and that it is a merged layer. And then I'm going to duplicate that to go into our next software. So we are going to open up our filter and go to Skylum and Luminar AI. And if you read today's blog post already, you'll know that Luminar released an update. They just started rolling it out yesterday, and it's 1.0.1. So it's, and there it is telling me to update it, which I never like to do right before a webinar. So I'll do it later on. So I'm going to say remind me later. And what they're doing is most of it is just kind of bug fixing and some things in the background. But I'll show you when we get into the other panel. There is one change that I'm kind of excited about. I think it's going to make things easier for everybody. So when you first open it up, you come up to this template section. And if you haven't used this before, this new product, this is the one they came out with in December. It analyzes the image and it actually suggests a category for your subject of what presets it think may work well for this image, whether it's, you know, animals or landscape, or in this case, it opened up objects. So I'm going to click on that section and see what it has in here. And the one I ended up liking was this one called Razor. And that really boosted these colors even more. I did pull back the opacity a little bit, and they don't have numbers here, but I'm going to go back just a little. So that would probably be about a 90% if you were guessing on a number. And then from here, we can go over to the Edit tab, which will let us do all of our other processing. So the way this has been laid out, and this was in Luminar 4 as well, you had these 4 tabs. You had the Essentials, Creative, Portrait, and Pro. Instead of these 4 tabs, they're now going to have all of these sections listed in one row. They're still going to be divided by section, and they're also going to be color coded. So each section has its own color. I think it's going to make it easier to find something, because instead of trying to remember what tab something's on, you can just scroll through the list if you're not sure. And as it has been with this product, if you see a function that's got this little dot in the beginning of it, that means the template that I chose has made some changes in there. So from here, we're going to go to a vignette. I'm going to add a little bit of a vignette to this. And I'm going to change my size my amount first to -78. And the negative will darken, the other side will give you the white vignette. So I want to darken my edges. So I'm going to 78. I'm going to leave the size at 50. And then under advanced settings, I'm going to feather this a little bit more. So I'm going up to about 33. And then the inner light is going to brighten my center. And I'm going to bring that up a little. And then I'm going back up to structure. And the template set this to 41. I'm going to boost that to 64 to crisp up this image a little bit. And then on the Pro tab, I'm going to use the super contrast. The super contrast in this program is really cool, because normally contrast changes the color of the image as well as the contrast, where this really just changes the contrast without affecting the color. I've seen, you know, this demonstrated, and I've used it a few times too, and it's very, very cool. So we're going to change the highlights to 20 and the midtones to 30. And then change my page here. Then I'm going to go to Dodge and Burn. And this is just like in Photoshop, or like in the old traditional darkroom. I want to go to Darken because I want to burn. I want my size, I'm going to leave there. Strength, I'm going to bring back to like 30% because I don't want to overdo it at once. And I just wanted to darken this top edge a little bit more to tone down that. So I'm going to go across a little bit too. Tone down that one area a little bit more up there. And then on the Creative tab, we're going to go to Mood, which is where you find the lookup tables. And lookup tables are kind of like presets. And this was described very well. They had a webinar last week for affiliates to show us these new changes that were coming. And a good way of describing the difference between a lookup table and a preset changes, like it would change all of these settings. If you made a change, it would change something here. This just applies a look on top of your image without changing any of the other settings. So hopefully that makes, we don't need that right now. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to go in here and I chose Geneva. And these are separated by categories. And I like the way that just kind of made it pop a little bit more. And then we're going to click apply to go back to Photoshop. It takes a few seconds to export it back in. So, say that again, dear. I am going to use Luminar a couple other times. Yes. Somebody wanted to know if this was the only Luminar. I am going to touch on that on a couple of projects. And yes, this is being recorded and it will be on my YouTube channel tomorrow in the morning sometime. And you'll also get an automatic email from Zoom, and I'll have the link in there. Plus, I'll put it in the blog on Thursday and Sunday so that if you miss any of it, you'll be able to catch it then. Alrighty, so here we can see if I turn this off, that was before we went into Luminar, and this is after. So that really just brought out all these colors and really made this pop. So this could be done at this point. And most of the projects today, I'm going to kind of show you different ways that I've processed it once I get to a completed stage. And this one, I liked, the way this was, and I'm going to rename this like I usually do. So I know that was my Luminar adjustments. And I'm going to duplicate that layer. And now I'm going to show you a couple different things in Studio, Topaz Studio. So I'm going to go in here. And you know me, I like to try different things and totally change up the look of something. And these two are going to be completely different than this very bright image that we have here. And I went into add a filter. And I'm going to go down to the stylistic section and we're going to use AI Remix. And I don't always use this function because it does some cool things, but there's some very funky things that are a little over the top sometimes. But remember, you can always adjust the styles as well. So I started playing around in here the other day to see what I could find. And this one called Business Casual. It's one that I've used a few times because it is one of the more subtle looks. And that gave it this kind of, not really sepia, but a more peachy, kind of warm tone coral color maybe. So this was one look that I liked. So from here you can say accept. And you can see, obviously that's way different than that version. So now we can actually, without closing this file, I'm going to turn this layer off, click back on my Luminar one and duplicate that again and go back to, so I can rename that Business Casual Remix. And take this layer, because that one's turned off, it won't see it. We can go back and try something else. And this time we're going to use one of the looks rather than a filter. So this time I went into add a look and I went to the moody category. And the one that I liked, I give it a chance to catch up here. It's still loading. It's the silent movie detailed, which is a black and white preset. Come on. All right. And we're going to click apply. And that will open the panel. And if you wanted to, you could make other adjustments to the black and white, the abstraction, the HSL color tuning, if you wanted to fine tune it. But I think that looks pretty good. It's got some nice contrast in it. It's a pretty strong looking black and white. So I'm just going to say accept. And now we're back to Photoshop. So you can have both versions here. I actually just thought of something else that would be cool to try. I'm going to put the black and white. Let's see, let's leave that there. Take this layer and let's lower the opacity and kind of give you the black and white, but a really faded toned kind of black and white. So that's another way you can play around and try some things. Somebody asked in the questions what the background was for these bottles. This was actually a setup at the conference that was a giant light table, and she had some different backgrounds. It's like a textured, I think it's like a plexiglass. I don't think it's actually glass, with colored lights behind it. Oh, Dave said it was a, like one of those ceiling panels for a light in like an office. So it's like a plastic kind of a material. And then she had these different lights and colored papers and things behind it. So that's how we got some pretty cool things. She had quite the array of glassware for photographing. So that's another way you can even play with these. You can change blending modes and opacities and give you some other looks. So somebody asked about, let's see, what does shadow contrast and highlight contrast, etc. Those that I did over in Luminar, the shadow contrast and highlight contrast are just that they're focusing the contrast of the image just in either the shadow or the highlight area, rather than contrasting the entire image at once. So it's letting you target either the dark or light areas. Good question. Thank you. Alrighty. So our next project is some roses. These were, I think, from our anniversary a few years ago that my husband bought me. And they got this really pretty color when they kind of dried out. They didn't just like crumple up and die. They had these really cool colors to them. And my background here, this is a piece of scrapbook paper, as is the background. And I just had this set up in my kitchen. I just put the two pieces of paper, you know, one was flat, one was leaning behind it. And then I played around and did some photographs. So we're going to duplicate our background layer, and I'm going to add a hue and saturation adjustment here. And what I wanted to do on this one, this bottom paper has a slight off-white tint to it. So I'm going to go into the yellows, and I actually took the yellow saturation all the way down because it didn't affect anything else in the flowers. And then I did go into the reds, and I lowered that just a little bit because they were really more of a purpley color when they dried, and so I really wanted to kind of get that color here because that's going to go with the texture I'm going to use in a minute. So that's there. So I'm going to drag in a texture, and most of you have seen me do this before, I think, but I work with two monitors. So I have everything lined up on the second monitor ready to go for these projects. If you didn't have a second monitor, you would just go to File, Open, and let me go to my webinars. And we're going to use this texture. So I'll open this one this way, and I'll show you how to drag it into your image. So you would take the Move tool. So I've got two separate files right now. I've got my texture and my image. I'm going to grab the header for the texture and pull down so I can see the two images side by side. Click anywhere in the texture, click hold with the left mouse button, and just drag your cursor over the image. And you can close this file. And now you can see we have our texture on top of our image. And we're going to resize it to cover our image. Alrighty, and from here, I'm going to change my blending mode to multiply. And I'm going to bring back, I'm actually leaving the opacity right now at 100%, but I don't want that texture on my flowers. So I'm going to add a layer mask, which is the rectangle with the circle in the middle down here at the bottom. Remember, when this is white, you're still seeing everything on this image. So I'm going to grab a brush. Nope, not that one. Where's my brush? Oh, that was the pencil tool. So brush, I want to use a soft round brush. I want my foreground color to be black. I'm going to make this a little bigger. I'm using my bracket keys, the square bracket keys to the right of the letter P on your keyboard. And I am going to take most of it off, so I'm going to leave that at 91%. And I'm just going to start painting where I want to get rid of the texture. And I'm going to kind of outline it first, and then I can fill in my, and once I let go of the mouse, you can see what I've just drawn there. So white, black hides, white reveals. So what we're hiding part of this texture layer by painting it with black, and then we're revealing so you can see what's underneath by hiding part of the texture. You're seeing that layer underneath of it. And we'll make this brush bigger. We can just, I'm going to quickly do this for now because I have lots to cover yet. I only planned 4 projects, but we're already at 20 after 4. So trying to get everything in by 5. All right, so that's pretty much it. I think I've gotten most of it here. You can take a look over there and you can see if you've missed spots. So I have the texture now only on my background. Let me change my page here. All right, so we're going to add another hue and saturation adjustment because I want to change the color of the texture. But before I move anything, because I only want this hue and saturation layer to adjust the texture and not the whole image, I'm going to clip these 2 layers together. And the way I do it, as everything, there's more than one way. I use the keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-G for grouping. That would be Command-Option-G on a Mac. And you'll see that little arrow pointing down. So now it's telling me this layer is clipped to this layer. So I'm going to reopen my control panel. And I'm going to change the master hue to +20. So I'm changing the tone of this purple a little bit, and then I'm bringing the saturation down a little bit. Okay, so you can see the before and after. I made it a little redder purple to match the flowers, and then pulled back the saturation just a little bit. So I'm going to bring in now one of my other textures. This is a frame, a grunge frame border. And I'm dragging them from the other screen just because it saves time for me. But you would, if you didn't have the capability of doing that again, you would go to File, Open. Now, of course, that's not the color I want for this frame. So I'm going to choose my foreground color picker, where it's black right now. I'm going to click in there, open up my color picker. Now, the way I chose this color was I moved my cursor over the image, and you'll see it becomes like a little crosshairs. And you can select a color from within your image. And I wrote down the number, of course, and my number is going to be 474051. So I picked this kind of plum type of color. Now, when we normally fill a layer with color, with a, the whole layer with a solid color, I use the keyboard shortcut Alt Backspace, and that would be Option Delete on a Mac. But I don't want to fill the whole layer. If I did Alt Backspace now, it would fill my entire layer, which is not what I want to do. I only want to put color on the pixels that are holding color. I want the transparent pixels in the middle to stay transparent. So the quickest way to do that is to hold the Shift key when I do my Alt Backspace, and that will keep the transparent pixels transparent. The other way of doing that is to hit this little lock button and lock that layer, and then you could do the Alt Backspace. So let's see, for this one now, I want to leave the blending mode at normal, but I'm going to lower my opacity to about 80%. And then I'm going to bring in one more texture because I'm going to add a little bit more texture to the center of this image. This is another one of my grunge textures. All of the textures I'm using are from different groups on my website. And this, I'm going to change the same way. I've already got the color selected, so I'm going to do the same thing here, do the Shift Alt Backspace, and make it the same color as the frame. And this one I changed to, I just lowered. I think I went to, did I write that down? Stretch to cover. I didn't write down the blending mode. I'll have to change that. I changed it to soft light. Okay. And so now that's my first version. And I like that. And I'm a purple person, so I really like this. But say you've done this and now you want to try a different texture. You want it to be a different color. So I'm going to show you a way of doing that. And it will also make it quicker because we're going to save this layer mask and we're going to use that in the new one. So I'm going to turn off these top 3 layers. And I'm going to highlight this layer, because anytime you bring in a new layer or create a new layer, it always adds above whatever layer is active. So right now I've made this texture layer active. And I'm going to bring in a different texture. And this one's going to be, this is from my new watercolor collections that I released on Sunday. And we're going to cover our image with that. And I'm actually going to turn off the purple right now because I want to change the blending mode on this one. And I'm going to change this to multiply and lower the opacity to 68%. So we're going for a completely different look here. But I still want to take that texture off of the flowers. So instead of recreating the mask, I can click on that mask, hold down the Alt Option key, and then just drag that mask up to that layer. So just like that, you don't have to recreate it. You can just click and drag it. So again, that's hold down the Alt key on a PC, Option key on a Mac. Keep holding that key, click in here, and just drag it up to the other layer. Oops. Oh, that's weird. What did I do? There we go. All righty. So that's how we can bring that up. So now I want to re-put on the borders, but I, of course, don't want that color. So I'm going to go back to my foreground color picker, and I'm going to change my color to A3, 5, A6E, and do the Shift Alt backspace. Oops, got to say OK first. Shift Alt backspace. Oh, that's why, because I didn't highlight my layer. I'm like, there we go. And did that work? It changed back to the other color. Let's try that again. All righty. Helps if I'm on the right layer. 3, 5, A, 6, E. And Shift Alt backspace. There we go. Now we got the right color. So I left that at normal and I brought down the opacity to 50%. And then we're going to turn this layer back on and we're going to fill that one, Shift Alt backspace. And I changed that one to, that's what I left at normal, but then I lowered this to 45%. So it's always a matter of, playing around with the blending modes and the opacities to get a color you like. So you can very quickly, just change it to a totally different look by changing your that one texture and then the color of these two. So it's a couple of different options. All right, do we have any questions? Yes, somebody said Shift Alt, there's no backspace on a Mac. On a Mac, instead of Alt backspace, it's Option Delete to fill the layer. Yes, comforting to see that I don't always have the right layer selected. Yes, when you're moving around, sometimes we forget to click the right layer. So we all do that, no matter how many times we play around. All right, so the next project is a barn. Gee, surprise. Gotta get one of those in there, right? There's so many barns around here. It's so cool. Yes, as Dave said, to remind you guys of our Barns and Backroads workshops. Hopefully we get everybody able to travel again soon. We have spring workshops lined up as well as fall. And those are on the website. And I know I've posted it in the blog recently as well. Somebody said, yes, is it possible to do these adjustments with Photoshop Elements? Absolutely. Everything I'm doing today can be done in Photoshop, Elements, On1, Affinity, anything that you can do layers with. So any basic editing program can do these. I'm not doing anything that's specific to Photoshop. It just, tools may be in a slightly different place, but all of these shortcuts will work, I know, on Elements, and most likely on the others as well. Most of them all use the same types of things there. So good question. Thanks, Barbara. Alrighty. So for our barn, the first thing I want to do is grab my healing brush. And I'm not too worried about these lines in the sky because I'm going to change my sky, but I am going to go ahead and just quickly get rid of them. And I think I've showed you guys this before, but if you want to draw a straight line with any brush tool, if you click at the beginning and then move your cursor to an ending point and click, it draws a straight line. And it did an okay job here. Sometimes that's just the way the healing brush is. It doesn't always do a perfect job. Sometimes you have to go over it again. But it makes it's a great way to draw. I'm going to make the brush a little bigger. Draw a straight line. So you click the beginning, then hold the shift key and click the end. And of course it's not cooperating. So we're going to cheat and draw our own line. But sometimes, like if you're working around the edge of a building or something and you're really trying to get rid of marks, it's a good way to do that. And then I'm really more concerned about getting rid of this one, but in the trees. And some days the healing brush doesn't really want to work right, but that works okay for what we're doing here. Perfect. And I'm also going to, there's a top of a telephone pole right here. I'm going to get rid of that. And this one road is kind of bright, so I'm going to also get rid of that. And you could use the clone stamp or the healing brush, whichever. I usually try to start with the healing brush because it's faster. And then if something doesn't work, then I'll switch over to the clone stamp. And it doesn't have to be perfect because you're really not going to see this, I know, when I'm done. I actually went back after I did the first processing of what I'm going to do today and changed it later on because it was kind of standing out a little too much. So you can always do these things later in the process if needed. All right, for this one, we're going to go to Luminar as well. So Skylum, Luminar AI. And we're going to do a few things here as well as replace the sky. This program edits pretty quick, but it does take a while to open sometimes. So I'm going to go in templates. I'm going to go to landscape. And I went into this overcast one. Even though I don't have an overcast image, I tried a few different ones and didn't find what I like. And I went in here and I tried this dynamic result. And it was like, wow, really made everything pop. But it was a little over the top saturation wise, so I did bring this down to maybe about 70%. And then I'm going to go to my edit tab. And I want to change my sky. So we're going into the creative section, Sky AI. And this is one of my skies I've imported. I do give this one with the notes. It's one of the ones from one of my collections. And I went with Puffy Clouds 4. And I did make a few changes. I lowered the horizon position because I wanted to see some more of the clouds that were at the top. And again, this is all, depending what you end up with, just playing around and see what works best. And then I up the relight scene a little. It does a really good job of matching the lighting to the sky, especially when you have like a sunset or, dramatic sky, it really tones the images very well. So anyway, if you were bringing in this sky, because it's in my list because I brought in a whole bunch of skies, but if you were bringing in one of your own, you would go all the way to the bottom and click on Load Custom Sky Image, and then you would just go to wherever it is in your computer, and that would add it to that list. So next I want to go to Mystical. This kind of gives things, I don't know, just a nice, kind of a, not really a soft look, but I did a pretty minor on this one. And then in the shadows, I up that a little. Just, I don't know, it gives it a cool look. And it varies again, depending on the image. And then I'm going to go back to Photoshop. And then we're going to do an effect with Nik Silver Effects Pro, which is their black and white program. But we're gonna, I'm shooting for a very antique-y, faded kind of look. That was my thought when I started this image. Just based on the subject, I really wanted to, and you can see there's our before and after. You can see I got a lot more detail in here, a little more light in the bottom compared to the original. So that's what I was able to do with the Luminar. So I'm going to, I don't have to duplicate this because Nik does make its own layer. It's one of the few softwares that does. And I have mine docked down here. So I'm going to open that up and go to my Silver Effects Pro 2. And I went to, in the vintage group of presets, and I used Antique Plate 2. So even though we did all this great work to sharpen things up and make the lighting perfect, now I'm going in a totally different way, but I still always like to start with a good image before I get into this creative kind of stuff. And then I made some changes over here. So under global adjustments, I took the brightness to 22, the contrast just tweaked a little, and the structure I went up on to there. Then I came down to, in the color filters, I used the orange one, and that really made the cloud detail pop and the darker areas, which I liked. And then down under the finishing adjustments, under image borders, I clicked that drop down and I went with number 6. And then you can tweak that as well. Where this clean and rough slider is, I took it all the way to the right. And then I did under vary border, I changed that to 41. Now you can see it changed the way that it was processing there. And then we can say okay and go back to Photoshop. Okay, come on. Why are you not letting me close? There we go. It was stuck in that box. Let's see if we have a couple questions, I think. Is Topaz Studio 2 ever going to be fully developed? That's a great question, Jack. I have heard virtually nothing from Topaz in quite some time. They keep up, they are doing updates to other products. They have not done anything with Studio, which I'm not real happy about. They've kind of dropped the ball on that one, I think. So if I hear anything, I will let you guys know. Can you do your mask before you add the texture? No, you're masking part of that texture off of the layer when we did that purple one. So you would need to apply the texture so you can see what it is that you want to mask off. Good question. And let's see, the keyboard shortcut for keeping the transparent pixels transparent. Just hold the shift. If you're on a PC, it would be Shift Alt Backspace. If you're on a Mac, it would be Shift Option Delete. And are you now preferring Luminar AI to Luminar 4? Yes, I am. Luminar AI has a ton of new features, all of this AI powered, the templates that they've developed and the different functions in there, and there's a lot more even in the works. Within the first quarter, they've promised where the drop down is for the list of skies, they're going to have thumbnails there, which I'm very excited about because it will make it much, much easier to do different things. They are slated, I'm looking at my notes from the webinar last week. They are going to have an updated version, the 1.1. Right now it was 1.0.1 with some of these other features sometime in February. So yeah, there are definitely some cool things in the works there too. Let's see, I think we have one other. That's the bottom. Question, would you completely finished with all the edits and textures presets, how do you save to go back to Lightroom if that's where you started? Do you just save or do you flatten or merge? If say at this point I've done a bunch of things and I want to save this, if I brought this in from Lightroom and I save it, it will return it to my Lightroom catalog. I did not bring this in from Lightroom, so right now, if I save this, it would not go back to Lightroom. You have to bring your image in from Lightroom and then it will automatically save back. I always save everything as a TIFF file first because I want to keep my layers in case I want to go in and change things. And I prefer the TIFF over the PSD because I can open a TIFF file in other programs where a PSD you can only open in Photoshop. And then after I've saved the PSD, if I want a JPEG version, then I will save it as a JPEG again as well. Alrighty, so let me move on. So from here, I did save this file and I have a version saved. So I'm going to close this and I want to show you another way that I edited this. I wanted to give it even a little more of a grunge look. And I have an app or a program. They also make these apps for your phones. It's called grungetastic. And this is by a company called JixiePix, Jixipix. And I had gotten a bunch of these for my iPhone. And I'm just going to drag in the image. And this is the one we just finished. I already had it saved. So I'm going to just bring this in. And of course, that one doesn't look very good. But they have all these categories down here: pop grunge, bleached, grunge, distressed, gritty, worn, and worn pop. And each one has about 20 different effects. This software, if you were to purchase it, is $9.99 for the desktop. If you want the phone version, it's like $1.99. And they also have, they've got probably 20 or more different programs. They have ones that do watercolor effects, oil painting effects, torn paper looks. There's lots of different things. And let's see, I think I have, let me see what else I have in my notes for it. I'm including a free copy of this with, if you purchase my notes for today's webinar. So for $5, you get my notes and all the goodies I always give you, plus you get this software worth $10. And if you want to buy any of their other stuff, I have a discount code that you can use and save 25% on anything else besides the free one. And I will, have some details on that when I post all this in the blog. But to get the freebie one, you have to get the notes. So, little bribery. So in this one, I decided to use the grunge look because, of course, that's my thing. And I chose number 20. And what I like about this program, and it's really kind of fun, even if you're doing it on your phone, if you want to just kind of play and see what the computer can come up with, this little dice thing up here, if you click that, it will just change it to a random effect. And you can just keep, it's called like roll the dice and see what you end up with. And sometimes you get surprised. Or you can choose, you know, like I'm doing here, choose a setting yourself, and then you can fine tune all these things here. So these are the textures and the border that it's using. I don't want this border at all because I already have a border on here. So I'm going to just take that down to 0. And I did change this greenish color. You can click in there and change your colors. And I changed mine to about here. Brought the green down. It's a little touchy, this lighter, and blue relief there. So I want a little more of that sepia look. And I lowered the opacity of it a little bit too. Once you click and start sliding, the number will pop up. And then the enhanced contrast, I went to 30. And then to save this, you would just click on this icon up here and you can save it. You can also save your own preset combination. So if I like that combination, I can save that myself as well. And you can also send things to some of their other products as well. So there's lots of really cool things you can do with this one. And it's fun. I have a bunch of theirs, like I said, on my phone. Some of these at the holiday time, I'm just going to close this because I already have it saved. They, for like the 12 days before Christmas, they did various specials and freebies. So I think a lot of their stuff I've gotten for free or at very cheap cost because they've done all these great sales and stuff. So it's definitely a company to check out. And I think they have their stuff for Android too, both iPhones and Androids. All right, so this is an example of taking a really ugly image and we're going to do something really fun with it. We're going to make a birthday card. So the first thing I did here, of course, duplicate my background layer and Control J. Okay, come on, get with the program. There we go. And then I'm going to use that healing brush again. And I wanted to get rid of this one bud here that was just like completely out of focus. It just didn't really do anything for me. And I said I usually try starting with the healing brush for the heck of it and see where we get. And then it's also just a quick way to do this without messing, because the background's kind of pretty straightforward and I know I'm going to be doing other stuff over it, so I'm really not going to see it anyway. And then I decided to get rid of this leaf. And get rid of all that. And we're going to get rid of this leaf down here in the corner. So there we go. That'll do it. Good enough. You know, you can get really picky and fussy, but it will work for, trust me, you're not going to see that when I get done with this. So we did that. Now we're going to go back to my studio. And I decided, I don't know, when I was playing with this again, I was playing around with Remix. And I happened to do it on these two projects. And I really haven't used Remix a lot lately. But I really wanted to just try to do something different here. First I ran my AI clear just to sharpen this up a little bit and get rid of any noise in the background. I typically do that on pretty much every image. I haven't been doing that today, but I usually do that on all my images. And the AI clear, if you're not familiar with it, does detail, clarity, and denoise all in one shot. So it's smart enough to know what areas to add the detail and clarity to sharpen up your image, and then it knows what to do the denoise on. So it's a pretty smart filter. It is also AI powered. So we've done that, and I'm going to go add filter again. Now I'm going to go to my remix, which is also AI powered. And I am going to use a color for one. And it's called Desert Prism. And I was just looking for something really funky. And then you can always try the different style strengths. And I didn't think I would like it on high, but it actually kind of toned down some of the pattern in the background. Somebody said, have you used content aware fill in Photoshop? You know, I always forget about that one, to be honest. I should use that more often. Thank you. So yeah, sometimes you just get involved and you get used to doing things a certain way and you just keep doing that. I think we all are guilty of that. Brightness, I'm going to bring down a little bit, and sharpness I brought up a little bit more. Alrighty, so I thought that was a pretty cool look. And so with that look, I was like, this would make a really pretty card. So that was where the thought came to do a card. So because I know I want to do a card, I want to crop this to a 5x7. So I'm going to click on my crop tool, and I'm going to type in here 7 and 5, and it's going to show me, you know, that shape. And I also brought this down just a little bit more and center. So I want to get rid of a little bit of that top, and then I kind of recentered it from there. Just so these were not quite in the corner, but a little bit closer over. And then we're going to click on that. And then I added a bokeh texture. And I brought in a gray one because I didn't want to change the color. And gray is good for that, because with the blending modes, we can get rid of the gray and just keep the brighter areas. And I changed this to hard light. And I left the opacity at 100%. I did also try flipping this around. So there's two ways you can rotate something. You can either put your cursor outside the corner and just drag it around, and it wants to do that because I have it cropped to a certain shape. Or you can do edit. Let's get off of that. Crop, edit, transform, rotate 180. And that only rotates that one layer. And it had more of the bokeh spots that were in the lower corners. That's why I wanted to bring that up to the right-hand corner. And then I'm going to add some type to this. So I'm going to click on my type tool. The font that I used was, it's called BP Black and White. And I don't remember where I got this. I have so many fonts, I couldn't even begin to tell you where I get them all. But if you don't have that font, you could use any script font that you liked. I chose a script, and it changed my size. When you click the drop down, it has preset sizes in here, but you can click in this box and type any number up to 999. So I'm using 80-point type. I used to be a typesetter, so I'm a type nerd. I'm going to change the color to white, which would, pure white would be FFF, and say OK. What's that been? Grungetastic, yes, is for both PC and Mac. Yes. All right, so I'm going to just click to start typing. And I'm going to type happy. And I want to put birthday on a separate layer. And I'm going to click off so it kind of completes that. Because I want to be able to move them and overlap them independently. I don't want them, you know, like normal spacing. So I have my type tool again. I'm going to hold my shift key and then click again, and that will make me a new layer. And I can type birthday. And I'm not worrying really about where they are because I know I'm going to move these around. So I brought birthday down so that this curl was kind of around that bud there. And then happy, I'm going to double click in here. And you can either, once you double click and highlight type, To move it, you have to keep your cursor off of the type till you get that move tool function, or you could change to the move tool and get the bounding box, and then you would click right on the letters. So either way, sometimes this way is easier to see. And I moved this so that I wanted the downstrokes of the P to be crossing, but I didn't want these two letters touching. So of course, that doesn't show up really well. So we're going to change our layer styles to add some effects to this type. First thing before I do that, you'll notice with some of these letters, it looks like it did it right this time. It must be remembering my settings from before. Some of the characters may not line up properly. Usually you'll get a gap with some of the script faces. And if you go into your character box, I have mine docked here. You would just go to Window and Character if you don't have it over here. And yeah, it's remembering what I set before. Between this V and the A, you can change in this drop down how much it can, it's called kerning letters when you're doing this. And you can change the spacing between letters. So you would just, in this case, under happy, I want to highlight just the APPY because I didn't need to change between the H and the A, just the other letters, and then you would change it from here. So if I change it to 0, you'll see what it looked like. See how they didn't quite line up? So I'm going to go back in and re-highlight and rechange it. So you can see how they moved closer together. And then this letter between the I, go back to the type tool, between the I and the R is actually too tight. So I'm going to change that to 25. And there you go. No, that's lined up better. So that's something to just pay attention to when you're using script fonts. So to add layer styles, we're going to double click and close that. Anywhere in this blank gray area of the box, just double click, and that will open up your layer style box. And we're going to do several things in here. And I like to do this to type to really give it some depth and dimension, and just makes it stand out better than this, like, you know, plastered on lettering. First thing I want to do is bevel and emboss. So if you click a box, make sure you highlight that line so that you get the proper controls here in the center panel. So I want it to be an inner bevel. Chisel Soft is probably going to remember my settings from when I was doing this the other day. I want the depth at 188%. Again, you're just, moving the sliders around. You can see how, if you look at the word happy, that's the one that's highlighted, how it's giving some shadows to that letters to give it that depth. So we're going to bring that back a little. Let's just type it in, be faster. And then the direction I want up, because I want it to look like it's a bevel up. Size 21, soften 15. And that's all I need to do for that part. But I want to also add a stroke. And again, it's remembering what I did the other day. So I decided to choose the purple out of the image. I used 8 pixels and I centered it, which means like half of it is on the letter and half of it is around the letter. You can also do it all the way on the inside or outside. So if I did it on the outside, it would make the letters fatter. And I decided on the center looked better because I didn't want the letters to be too bold. Yes, Jerry, you have a question? Okay. I will answer that in a moment. So we're going to leave the blend mode at normal. Opacity I brought back just a little bit, 80%. And then just like we would choose a color over here, click in the color box, and I clicked around in the image to end up with that color.
Somebody had a question about that, where the numbers come from, when you pick it, the color picker, color.
Oh, when I type these numbers, yeah. Once I choose a color, because I'm, typing up the notes and I want to be able to replicate it, this is where I get that number. This is what's called the hex number. And that comes from it's a compilation of the numbers that make up, you know, the red, green, and blues that make up your color. So I don't know that number before I start, but once I determine what color I want, then that's how I know what number it is. Thank you. And then I also like to do drop shadows, and that gives that extra little bit of depth and separation between the letters. Blending mode normal, it usually will default to black. Opacity is good. I like to change the light angle to 135 usually. That brings your light, you know, upper left to lower right. Distance, spread, size, those are good. And that's just, you know, the distance changes how far away it is from the letter. And then the spread is how far away the spread is, and then the size also changes that. So I'm going to just put my numbers back in. 17, 41, and 16. Whoops, that's not right. 17, not 174. There we go. That looks more normal. So now I've done the 3 things I know I wanted to do. So I'm going to say, okay. Now we need to do the same thing to the word birthday, but we don't have to retype all of that in. We're just going to right click over here and copy our layer style. Click on the line for birthday, right click, and paste layer style. And voila. And then I wanted the downstrokes of the P's to be in front of the word birthday. So I'm going to just drag that layer up above birthday. And now my downstrokes are there. So now I have something that's ready. I could get printed, make some pretty birthday cards, and send them out. All right, so let's see what we can do for questions here. Right click to the Mac. That's a good question. I've been doing a lot of Mac keyboard shortcuts. I would have to check on that. I will check for you, Amy, and I will put that in the follow-up in Thursday's blog on how to right click. I know there's a way. It's yeah, somebody else may know because I'm not a Mac user. But I will double check on that for you. And actually, Robert asked that. Thank you. And Amy, yes, the gray bokeh is one of mine. I don't remember which bokeh set it's in, but I can look it up for you if you're interested. Just shoot me an email. Let's see, other questions. I downloaded the notes, but I don't see this program. On the second to the last page of the notes, there is a page about Jixie Pix. And what you're going to do is go to the link at the top of that page to their, which will take you to the website. And then you're going to put that in the cart, and there's a code to input to get the for free. If you also want to use the 25% off coupon, you just need to do them as separate transactions because you can't use more than one coupon code in an order. So you're going to get your free product, and then if you want to purchase anything else and save the 25%, just do that stuff as a separate order. And yes, grungetastic is for the Mac. Do you use the patch tool? I really have not used that tool. It's one I never really got into using. I should look at that. So thank you, Donna. As we know, with almost everything in Photoshop, there's multiple ways of doing it. And I guess it's, you know, you go with what you know and what works, but I'm always open to learning new things too. So I will definitely take a look at that. Virginia says, right click for Mac can be turned on in your settings. So if you know how to do that, you can take a look there. And somebody else says, I think it's control click on a Mac. So I will Google that and I will check it out, but those are a couple options that you can try for the Mac users on the copying those layer styles. You could probably, I wonder if there's a way, if we go up to edit, there's probably somewhere else you can do it other than right clicking. I will take a look. I'm sure there are more than one way, like everything. So let me bring up my
software.
hang on one second.
Not working with 2021 because it's old.
What's that, dear?
So they asked about working Nick software working with PS 2021. I don't think it will.
Yes, it will. And somebody asked about the Nick software working with Photoshop 2021. Yes, it does, because I have Photoshop 2021 and I have no problem with it. You do need probably the latest version of the Nick software. If you have the free version, back when Google owned it, that probably will not work. I purchased the newer version after DxO took it over from Google. And I also purchased the upgrade they had last year because they came out with a new perspective program that was part of it. Within here, they have, where is it? Perspective effects, which I really like. And they also, to 5 of the different programs, because it's their 25th anniversary, they added 5 new presets to 5 of the programs, the color effects, silver effects, and stuff like that. So it was worth it. It wasn't a very expensive upgrade, so I did decide to purchase that as well. So thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. I do have some new texture sets I released last Sunday. They're 50% off until the end of the month. And again, today's notes are available with the Jixi Pick software. And those are $5 until the end of the month as well. Actually, the notes I have on sale till next Tuesday for a week, and then they'll be $7.50 after that. Thank you, everybody.